Everything you're going to see and hear in this entire video is being recorded right here through the Rodecaster video. So finally, I get to make a video about the Rodecaster video, which means this is my Rodecaster video. Let's switch over to this camera now because Rode did send the Rodecaster video to me at no cost, but this video is not sponsored. I don't have to say, do anything or make a video at all even, but I've had mine for about a month and I really like it. It is very complicated. And obviously, like, if you watch my channel for a while, you know that I'm a fan of Rode products. So I absolutely have, personal biases and preferences and things. And to be 100% honest with you, as I push this button right here, I'm rooting for this thing. I really want this to be something that finds its spot in the world, but I do think that it needs quite a bit of contextualization because it's a little bit different than what you might expect. And a few months ago, Rode gave me a demo on the Rodecaster video, and it took them, the people who made it, like 2 hours to cover most of it as quickly as possible. So there's a lot packed into this device, way more than I can fit into a full YouTube video. So instead of trying to just cover all the specs and all the things like that and every single feature it can do, which is kind of what I was originally planning to do, is make a big sort of, a big splashy video because I've been excited for months and months for this thing to finally come out. Instead, I decided, let's actually step back, look at some broad strokes about what this can do and try to contextualize it, see where it fits, where it might fit, and start to find a home and what the heck it even is, because it is a very complicated device. And that's something that I think is important to acknowledge and important to understand, is that sometimes things are complex. And we live in a world where stuff is often marketed as being super simple, and sometimes stuff is maybe marketed as being more simple than it is. This is not something you want to buy today to use for a project tomorrow. This is something you want to buy today to use for a project next month. Like, it is going to take a while to figure out, but that's because there's a lot in here. And so that's what this video is going to be. Definitely use chapter markers if needed. And then I can make more sort of bite-sized, digestible, specific kind of tutorials and feature-based videos on all the different things that the Rodecaster video can do. So I'm super excited about that. Let's dive into it right here, talking about the Rodecaster video. First thing I want to do that I've been waiting to do for a long time is switch over to this wireless microphone right here so I can go right here. And now finally, here we go. Yeah. I've been waiting so long to do that. I guess let's talk about the design, right? I think that's on my notes somewhere, is to go through the design of this thing. This is the Rodecaster Pro 2. I've got the Rodecaster Duo back here. I've got the original Rodecaster behind me over here. These things have made quite an impact in the world of, live streaming and multicam stuff and events and things, but they're all audio based, and something that I know myself and a lot of people have been wanting and hoping for is like, what if this could also just switch video? Because I think there are a lot of people who have used sort of this combo right here, myself very much included as one of those people. You've got your Rodecaster for your audio and all your routing, and then you've got your ATEM for your camera switching. And so when Rode kind of said, hey, we're coming out with something and we think you're going to like it, I bet you can kind of guess what it is. And I'm thinking, last year you guys released the Streamer X, which was an HDMI 4K capture card. Am I just going to walk into a room and see like an ATEM duct tape to a Rodecaster, which is kind of what I was expecting? But then I saw this and I was kind of surprised. It's so small and it's so it looks so simple, almost deceptively simple. One thing about the ATEM is it looks cool with all the buttons, but if you've used an ATEM for a while, unless you're like a crazy power user, you don't really use a lot of these buttons. They're kind of just there in the way. And the way that a lot of productions work, when you're doing multicam live productions especially, you kind of don't want to be bogged down with NASA mission control worth of buttons. You sort of want things that are easy to see. In this case, stuff that has nothing assigned to it it's just the buttons aren't even on. And then everything else is a big tactile, silent button that I can then press and switch over there. And so that is sort of the design philosophy that they went for with the Rodecaster video, including this small touchscreen here and then all these buttons here. So you really kind of have to learn how to navigate that. Now, what you can kind of see here is this screen that I have. When Rode gave me a demo of this, they had two little displays connected to it, and it was really cool. And they were like very nice displays. I found this one, which was like $50 on Amazon. So it's not as nice. I had to put a little 3D printed stand. This is just a small little external display, which not only makes things really helpful, but I would honestly say is probably essential. Having some kind of display, you can run this into your computer and that way you can see everything, or you can just run it to a display like this, which is honestly what I would recommend. Ideally, maybe even 2 displays like this. So you have your multicam, kind of what I have here, and then you can have your program view up there, and then it can still go into a computer. The reason I bring that up though is because the interface, if all you're trying to do is everything through this little touch screen right here, you can start to feel limited. They did do a very decent job. Like you go through some of the settings and you can just use the multifunction knob here to go through and adjust everything. Very, very similar to how things work on a Rodecaster Pro. So if you've been using that for a while, this should actually feel very familiar to you. But if you want to dive in more, you can kind of see here, there's a lot more options here. I can even see my audio mixer down here. And then there is Rode Central, so you can open up a Rodecaster video application through Rode Central that lets you then build scenes and mix your audio and kind of adjust your routing and dive into things a little bit more. So you can use the device just itself, although that's probably going to be the most difficult way to use it. I definitely recommend having some kind of external display, and then of course you can use your computer as well if you want to. So and all 3. So you can mix and match all different ways, which is cool. This is a 4 1080p HDMI input. We're going to talk about that in a second. We've also got a bunch of USB ports for connecting things like USB microphones, computers, hard drives, webcams, and we've got 2 XLR combo jacks. You've got 2 headphone outputs, and there are also 2 wireless receivers built in. So if you want to use something like this, the Rode Wireless Pro or any of the 4th gen Rode wireless devices, you can connect 2 of those at a time to the Rodecaster Video. And you have 2 HDMI outputs, which can be set to, whatever you want, program, preview, multicam, all that kind of stuff. So you have tons of flexibility built in there. And I am just recording right now into my SSD right here, which says that I have 86 hours left remaining in space. So that's it. I've just pressed the record button and I'm recording. I'm fully trusting this whole video into the Rodecaster Video. I'm not even recording on my camera's memory cards at all, which I always record internally. But I've been happy with how this looks. This is very smooth, very natural. This can accept any frame rate from 23.98 to 60, which is awesome. The important thing I've learned is just to make sure that your camera's HDMI output is set to 1080 and that the frame rate is set to match the camera. On my Sony cameras here, they can be set to automatically detect HDMI output, and I've had mixed results with that. Sometimes it looks great and sometimes it looks choppy, but if I switch their HDMI output to 1080, then it looks totally smooth. Now I did put an audio delay on here, so you can do that right inside the device itself, and I have a 7-frame delay, which just happened to be the thing that synced everything up. I like that they're doing this in frames instead of milliseconds because it's easy to remember 7 frames versus like 960 milliseconds. So let's talk about something I just mentioned, which might have perked your ears up a little bit when I said this has 4 HDMI inputs, and I mentioned they are 1080 inputs, and HDMI is 1080. This is a 1080 switcher. This is not a 4K switcher, which is something that I was that's the wrong camera, which is honestly something that surprised me because when Rode introduced the Streamer X last year, over a year ago at this point, it's a 4K capture card with like a little mini, Rodecaster compatibility put in there. I was like, that's kind of a preview. Let's take that and expand upon it. And then this is 1080. So I'll share with you everything that I've shared directly to Rode on multiple occasions, and I'll also share what they have told me, and then that can be the 4K discussion. The long and short of it is, if you're somebody who needs a 4K workflow, this isn't for you. This is just not the device for you, and that's just the way it is. If you're somebody who doesn't need 4K and 1080 is fine, then this could be an awesome option if you need more than just HDMI switching. This is way overkill if all you want to do is switch between HDMI sources. But I was shocked that there was no 4K. And what Rode said was that this is something that is designed for pro environments, and really, like, honestly, like the build quality is extremely heavy duty. It's mostly metal casing on the bottom, and then you've got top plastic here. This is something that can really stand up to those more intense environments, and in those like genuinely professional environments, one thing that there's no room for is sort of uncertainty or unreliability. And so Rode said that their main goal here is that this is rock solid reliable, that everything it's advertised as being able to do, you can do. And because of how workflows can vary, some people are going to get this and they're just going to switch between a couple of cameras. Maybe you just use it as a single camera capture card if you want to. Whereas other people are going to push it to the limits and start building, scenes and picture things and throw graphics everywhere and do all kinds of stuff with it. And it needs to be super reliable for all of those workflows. I guess throwing 4K into the mix could potentially jeopardize that reliability. If you're doing something relatively simple, it's probably fine. If you're doing every bell and whistle, you're making these crazy complex scenes, and you're throwing graphics and transitions and chroma keys and all that stuff on it, that's where maybe it's not going to be as rock solid reliable in every situation. And that's something that they just didn't want to deal with. So that was what they told me was a big part of their logic behind making this a 1080 switcher, in addition to keeping the cost down as low as possible, because with an MSRP of $1,200, this is already a very pricey device. And then if you were to add like a full-on Rodecaster on there or 4K, according to Rode, that would make the price go up even more. So trying to keep it sort of at this price point and reliable, sort of focused on 1080, which made sense to me. So I got that. However, my feedback to them was that I do think releasing something in 2024 should be 2024K, right? Because of the year that we live in. I think there are a few ways to handle this that could probably work. And one of them, at the very least, I was like, just make one channel 4K. Just give me one channel of 4K so that if I'm using this just as a simple capture card for a single camera for streaming video calls, like it's just on my desk day to day, I can use it in 4K. And then when I need to set it up for multicam switching, then maybe it goes down to 1080 and I, as the user, just accept that limitation. And then the other thing I thought of, which I think is kind of cool, is like just let the users accept those limitations. So for example, there's an application on my iPad that I use a lot called Procreate, which is it's not what it sounds like. It is a drawing and illustration application that kind of works like Photoshop, where you have a bunch of layers for your images and stuff. The number of layers you can have in Procreate depend on how big your canvas is, your project is. And so the bigger you make your thing, the fewer layers you can work with. And I think that's great because as the user, I can then decide I want to do a huge project, so that means it's going to limit my the number of layers I can use. I feel like there's something similar that maybe could be done here. What if this is 1080 if you want every bell and every whistle, but then what if it's 4K if you do just want basic switching or just a couple of core features, maybe not every single thing that it can do. And that way you kind of keep that 4K workflow reliable. Even put a disclaimer on there like, hey, you're switching to 4K, things might get wacky. I don't know, whatever that is, but at least then I, as the user, have that choice. I can do the full 1080 perfect workflow, or I could switch over to 4K, accepting whatever limitations or potential quirks might pop up with that. To me, that's what I would prefer as a user. So that's the feedback I've given to Rode, but I also understand them launching something entirely brand new and wanting to make sure that everything they say it can do incredibly well in every workflow in every environment. So that is my abbreviated 4K discussion. So while I literally can't touch on every feature that this can do in this video, I do want to cover some of the basics. Some of you've already seen. So I've got 4 cameras connected right here. That's what this bottom row is. And then I've got scenes up here. I've got several scenes put together, and this is just a fade to black button, which will also fade out my audio. So I'm not going to press that here. You can use these buttons to go into different things like keying and multi-source functionality and putting together graphics and all that stuff, which does also change a little bit of what I'm seeing on the screen here when I go into those different functions here. We've also got our cut auto and inspect buttons, which this is kind of cool because you can, without affecting anything, you can click this button and then tap on anything and see exactly what is happening there. And so that's super helpful. And I'm pretty sure that's not going to affect my recording. Shouldn't affect my recording. And then what's also awesome is the audio, because I do have these 2 combo jacks. This has the same preamp and basically the same guts as a Rodecaster Pro built right inside. So I love the Rodecaster, and I know it's got great preamps. I've been really shocked at how great this sounds. And so to mess with any of the audio, I can just press the multifunction button, and then I go here. Here's my combo. This is input 1. I can turn on phantom power because I'm using a condenser microphone right now. I can change my gain, all that sort of stuff. And then what you can also do in Rode Central is you can go through, just like you can with anything through Rode Central, and you basically have the Rodecaster's processing. So if you want to add in all the effects and the EQ and the processing and stuff, you can do that through here. You kind of have some basic effects in EQ. Which button? This button. I'll get there. Through this, I can go here and I can press this little sound wave, and now I have my depth, sparkle, and punch, and I can play with that a little bit. You can go much more advanced too if you want to, and you have it connected to your computer through the app, which is absolutely awesome. So going back into some of the I/O, we do have this Ethernet port here, which can be used for streaming and stuff like that. But you can also just stream over Wi-Fi, which is pretty crazy. And then we've got these USBs here for all kinds of stuff. You can connect to multiple computers just like a Rodecaster. You can also update the Rodecaster video and adjust the settings and stuff. I have my SSD plugged in here. You can do USB mic, you can do USB webcams. It does say that it needs to be specific kind, like UVC webcams. So I actually haven't gotten like my Sony cameras or my InstaLink webcams to work with the Rodecaster video. That's a bummer because I would really love to be able to use one of those right now as like a fifth input source. So you need specific types of webcams, I guess more high-end, more pro webcams. I don't know if that's something that could ever change in the future, but you can also then do USB mics. I think that's some pretty cool flexibility to be able to mix USB mics and XLR mics and wireless mics. And because it's a 1/4 inch, you can mix also line in and instruments and stuff too, if you want to, which is pretty awesome. And that also leads me to, even though I don't want to talk about like every specific feature, I do want to share maybe the feature I'm most excited about with the Rodecaster video, and that is auto switching. So you probably noticed this auto button on the Rodecaster. You can configure this in your computer through Rode Central to auto cut based on voice inputs. This is something I have wanted for years and a feature that so many people have asked about, as I know this is something a lot of people want and need. So imagine you're doing a multi-camera podcast, say, and you want the camera to be able to automatically switch based on who's talking. You can do that with the Rodecaster video. I don't know of anything else that can do that, and they've also implemented it really, really well. You just need to use your computer through Rode Central to set it up. So I have this cable here because I just want to give the reminder that anytime you're connecting this to your computer, use the super high speed cable that it comes with, or at least this is 5 gigabits per second. I like 20 gigabit per second cable. Like, use the highest speed cable possible, and that way you're going to get every feature. Same thing with the Streamer X. You're dealing with stuff like this, it needs to be connected through your computer with a high-speed cable. And then for video, it does just show up as a webcam. So just by the way, when you connect it to a computer, it's kind of similar to the Rodecaster. One USB port will give you like a main and a chat for audio, and then this just shows up as Rodecaster video for video. So it doesn't break out the 4 things. It's the same as like an ATEM or anything else where the whole device shows up as one video source in a computer. But anyway, through Rode Central, what you can do is you can essentially pair cameras with microphones and then assign them priority levels. So I have this microphone paired to this camera, I believe, if I'm doing this right. And then I have my wireless or my Interview Pro paired to my other camera. So what that should mean if I unmute this, so now I have the Interview Pro turned on, but I still have the NT1, so you might hear some mic bleed happening. But this auto button, if I press it, then it just switches to transition. But if I hold it down, it's going to turn blue. Oh, there you go. And that turned on auto switching. This microphone is linked to this camera, but then, well, I made a noise over here. But now I'm making a noise over here because I'm talking here. And if I go over here and talk into this microphone, now it should switch over there. There we go. There's the switch. Now it's switching over here because I talked into this microphone. And then going back over here, it's switching over here because I'm talking into this microphone. And then back over here, it's a little bit tricky because I'm the same person trying to not have it bleed over different microphones. This is very cool. This is one of those incredibly helpful things if you're somebody who kind of has to be in front of the camera and handle all of the behind the scenes stuff. Okay, I'm going to turn off auto switching. So I think I'm actually just going to stick with the Interview Pro since it allows me to sort of move around a little more easily because the microphone's not stuck in one place. I did want to go back here. I mentioned these inputs, these different inputs here. If there's nothing assigned to them, they don't light up. These ones up here are different scenes. So I put together some basic scenes. You can do like a picture-in-picture, which is pretty cool. And you can change, obviously you have to do this through Rode Central. How do I point to this? You can change this thing right here. You can change the color and the size and the positioning and all that. I have a split screen here. So some things that I've done here are I chose different video sources. I added a background and then I added colors around. You can also overlay graphics and stuff. And you get pretty complex. So I have every input now on a scene with no graphics. And I even have over here, I have a different scene where I'm having one of my video inputs as the background to other ones. So you can jump in between. If you're doing, I don't know which camera to look at, if you're doing guest interviews or you're bringing someone into a show, you can layer all this in. As you can see, everything's perfectly in sync too. So there's no like weird latency issues between cameras or anything. And that is where what I talked about Rode's design at the beginning, that's where it starts to make a lot of sense to me. Is like right now I'm one person trying to manage all of this. It works really, really well. This is like an easy thing to use when it doesn't have a million buttons. I love my ATEMs, but like, this is a lot of buttons on a device to keep track of. I mean, they all serve a purpose, but I've had this thing for a number of years, and there are definitely buttons on here I don't think I've ever pressed. There, now I've pressed all the buttons. And so this leads nicely into that contextualization discussion, because there are things like the ATEMs. And so I would like to attempt to contextualize the Rodecaster video in that world, because as I mentioned, the MSRP is $1,200. This is not an inexpensive device by any means. I think this is actually the most expensive product Rode has ever made. So kind of want to talk about that. I made some handy dandy graphics again, because I don't want to add in editing. Everything you're seeing in this video, every bit of audio, every bit of video is being recorded into the Rodecaster video. I'm not filming extra B-roll or anything like that. So I'm actually going to take a bit of a turn and talk about the ATEM Mini, because I think, well, one, this was sort of the first like multi-input switcher that was not thousands of dollars, was the ATEM Mini. And that it's a pretty breakthrough device, and it's been out for a number of years now. And I think what Blackmagic has done here is done a really good job, because I actually have the least expensive and the most expensive ATEMs are the ones that I own. The least expensive ATEM Mini starts at $300. The most expensive ATEM Mini, which is not so mini anymore, goes for $1,300. So here's my very fancy flow chart that kind of explains what I think Blackmagic has done really well here with the ATEMs. First, you start with your number of inputs, because they have two lines. One line of ATEMs has 4 inputs, one has 8. If you need 4, then you need to go for the ATEM Mini Pro. If you need 8, you go to the Extreme, because it's extremely big compared to the Pro. And then you basically just ask, do you want ISO recording, which means ISO is you can do separate tracks. You can record not just your video file, but you can record separate files for every camera, every input, everything. If that's something you need, then you need to go to the Pro ISO, so you bump up in price a little bit. Same thing with the Extreme. ISO, no or yes, $1,000, $1,300. So between that range, you go from $300 to $1,300. That's a $1,000 difference. And I think a thing that's going to happen with the Rodecaster video is people are going to see the $300 ATEM Mini and go, why is this Rodecaster video so much more expensive than something like an ATEM? And that actually led me to create another very advanced flowchart, because I actually think these are two different products. They're almost in two different categories. And as much as the Rodecaster video kind of looks like an ATEM, I actually don't think that it makes a ton of sense to compare the two. So here is why, because the Rodecaster video I feel like is in a different category, and I don't really know what to call it. The ATEM is essentially just a switcher. Like, you plug in your HDMI inputs and you can switch between them. When it comes to audio inputs on the ATEM, you don't have much. You have mic 1, mic 2, 3.5 inputs. You can turn them on, turn them off, turn it up, turn it down. The preamps are pretty horrendous within the ATEM Mini. It's definitely a video first device. And you can do basic stuff like picture-in-picture, transitions, basic keying. Like, it is a very powerful device, and for the price, it's unreal. Like, this thing has saved my butt so many times. It is one of my favorite tools. But that's kind of what it does. Whereas the Rodecaster video goes into this different product category that I'm not even entirely sure what to call it. So I, in my head, have been calling it like a production suite instead of just a production switcher. So that means then I get to pull out my next flowchart, switcher or suite. And that can help you find which one is super sweet for your setup. So here's kind of the difference. Do you need multi-HDMI input first and foremost? So if you're trying to figure out like, wow, look, this thing has buttons and it's expensive and I should buy it. Here's the first question to ask yourself. Do you need multi-HDMI input? If the answer is no, check this out. We're going to use a scene because now you can see me. Yeah. If you don't need multi-HDMI input and the answer is no, then just get a cam link. It's like $100 and you're done. You get 4K HDMI capture card and you're done. If you do need more than one HDMI source, whether that's cameras, consoles, computers, whatever, you need more than one HDMI source, your answer is yes. Now, this is where you're going to differentiate your products. You're going to need to figure out which type of switching you want to do. And this, I think, breaks down into simple versus advanced. So something like an ATEM is for more simple switching. And that includes just changing between your sources. That includes little picture-in-picture stuff, basic audio, that kind of stuff right there. You can throw this signal, of course, into something like Ecamm Live or OBS, and then you can build scenes on top of it. But internally, it's very limited. It's mainly, it's mainly just a switcher. And that takes you down to something like an ATEM. There's also that new Ulanzi switcher that came out, which is pretty sweet. Feel World makes one that's kind of awesome because it's like an ATEM with a big monitor, big touchscreen monitor up here, which is pretty cool. And those can range, if you're not going down the crazy giant ATEM Extreme route, those can range from like $300 to $600. The Rodecaster Video, I feel like, is in a different product category because it's more advanced. Maybe there's just a simple switcher and an advanced switcher, but this is where I think it's more of like a production suite because you can do complex graphics. Even this scene right here is kind of one of the more simple things that the Rodecaster Video can do, but it's more complex than a lot of other switchers can do. You can do much more complex keying, much more complex audio processing and audio inputs, and it's high quality preamps. It's not these crummy little preamps like the ATEM Mini has, but you have Rodecaster quality preamps built in here, and you have just all kinds of different routing options, different processing options. You can basically do everything from within the Rodecaster Video. You don't need a second application like Ecamm or OBS or whatever. It's a self-contained device, which is why I've been, calling it a production suite. And that's where the Rodecaster Video comes into play. Or the thing that I actually think the Rodecaster Video is closest to, its closest competitor, is this right here, which is the YoloBox Ultra. And the YoloBox Ultra has an MSRP of $1,600. And these two things are interesting to me because I do feel like even though they have very different form factors, I can't even fit them both in here, they kind of go for the same thing, which is total self-containment. That means you don't need other software. The YoloBox can even currently pop up like comments from your stream on screen, which is something I'd really love to see come to the Rodecaster Video. But you can do everything from here. You can do your keying, do your graphics, do your switching, do your overlays. You don't need anything else. It's a completely self-contained unit. And obviously this is just a big touchscreen device with no physical buttons, whereas the Rodecaster Video is mostly physical buttons with a tiny screen. So they basically took very different approaches to that same situation there. And this is the world that I think the Rodecaster Video is more in line with, is this production suite rather than production switcher. And I think that is pretty sweet. However, let's go over here. Camera 3, meet me over here. Going back to the argument about 4K, just to bring that up, I know that it probably would make things more expensive. Oops. But I do want to point out that the YoloBox Ultra has 4 HDMI inputs, and it is 4K. And it can do layers and compositing and a whole bunch of crazy stuff. I don't know, like the Rodecaster can do some things that the YoloBox can't do, and the YoloBox can do some things the Rodecaster can't do. The Rodecaster Video crushes everything else when it comes to audio inclusion and audio production. So that, that's definitely an important thing to keep in mind. But to kind of contextualize the Rodecaster Video, I think if you're looking at it as it's a $1,200 1080 HDMI switcher, obviously that's not a great deal at all because you just get this for $300 and be done. But if you look at it as not just a switcher, but a full-on production suite, which yes, it can do ISO recording. So I am recording my main file here, but I'm also getting separate tracks for everything else, which is going to be a lot of stuff on this hard drive. And it's cool that I just push, I really love, it's so satisfying. This is not my normal workflow usually, to just be able to push this one button and record everything, and I don't have to do stuff on my cameras at all. So all that to say, the Rodecaster Video is something that I find very interesting and something that I'm really excited about because I love tools like the ATEM and tools like the Rodecaster. These are things that solve problems. Prior to the ATEM, if you wanted to switch multiple HDMI sources, especially without spending thousands and thousands of dollars, there wasn't really a way to do that. Prior to the Rodecaster, if you wanted to easily mix a bunch of high quality audio, record on board, mix in sound effects, do all that kind of stuff, and then maybe even also use that as a pretty cool video and streaming interface for audio for video, there wasn't really a streamlined way to do that, and the Rodecaster popped up. And then I feel like the ATEM, was the leader in the video world. Rode was the leader in the audio world. Both of them are from Australia, so I don't know if that's a conspiracy of some kind. But then in the years since, you've seen competing products pop out. You've seen things come out that are, kind of more fully featured and seem better than the ATEM. If you just want a basic switcher, that Ulanzi that has a detachable face panel, kind of awesome. The Feel World that has a giant touchscreen, pretty awesome for just a little bit more money. Then you got more advanced stuff like the YoloBox coming out, which is like you don't even need a computer anymore. And so it's very cool to see so much smashed into one single device. Rode has a long road to go down when it comes to entering the world of video. They're an audio company. This is their second video-based product ever. So I think they do have a really good track record of firmware updates and product updates and updates based on community feedback. So obviously, like, the version that the Rodecaster Video is upon release is going to be very different than the version a couple of years from now, which is also why I always encourage people to give feedback directly to the companies and let them know what you like and don't like and need, because it's nice when companies actually pay attention to that stuff. And Rode does. They have a good track record of doing that. And I really do hope that this is something that finds its place and finds its context, whether it's in more high-end production environments or in, personal streaming setups, one-person setups, kind of like I'm doing right here. So even though we didn't cover everything that it can do, I hope I was able to give you kind of an idea of where it fits in the world and certain situations where it might not be a good choice for you or where it might actually be the perfect choice for you. And speaking of things that are great choices, I don't have any B-roll to put over here, so it's just gonna be my face. Thank you to everyone who helped support my channel. And if you want to know more about the world of audio and video production, actually, I'm gonna let the YouTube algorithm choose this. So here's a video selected specifically for you by the ever-knowing, all-powerful YouTube algorithm. It probably means you should watch that video.